Hei og velkommen til en ny dag av internettdagene. Hi and welcome to a new day of the Norwegian event, Internet Days. And today we have a conversation with Matt Fairhead. Welcome to us, Matt.
Hey, Morten. How are you? Good morning.
Fine, thank you. It's 1 hour earlier for you, so maybe you're still a little tired. I don't know.
It was an earlier wake up, but it's all okay. Nothing that I'm not used to.
We have invited Matt because he is one of the key persons in Blink, which is, and I will have Matt to explain what Blink specifically is, but Blink represents a category which is called employee apps in English. In Norwegian, we haven't found the good word about it, but communication app is one way to phrase it, and another one is to maybe call it a mobile intranet. And we have seen that there are maybe between 50 and 100 vendors in this market now, which has really exploded the last 5 years. And one of the upcoming stars in this industry is Blink. So we wanted to talk to Blink. So Matt, maybe you could start just explaining what is Blink and what do you do?
Yeah, of course, Morten. So you're right. There's many terms that talks around the types of companies that Blink is. And if we take it back, I guess, to brass tacks, really, Blink is at our core, a communications app. And we work almost exclusively with organizations that have a high number of frontline workers. And when I use that term, and when we use that term at Blink, frontline worker, we're talking about people who are disconnected from the business. And if you think of industries such as transportation, logistics, healthcare, facilities management, construction, the majority of that workforce aren't going into an office day in, day out. They're not sitting in front of a laptop or in front of a desk. They're having less touch time with their manager. And I think if you really look at a bus driver or an EMT worker or a clinician in the healthcare setting, that really brings that to life. But they're also disconnected from an IT perspective, where often they aren't afforded the same level of access that I would say you and I are, Morten. They often aren't provided with a corporate device, be that a laptop or a corporate phone, and often aren't provided with a corporate email address. So all of a sudden, trying to engage and communicate with the largest proportion of your workforce who are truly disconnected is a huge challenge for organizations. And if you look back to how historically that's been done, very much through paper notice boards and going into a common room and engaging with communications that way, through toolbox talks, passing information down the management structure, cascading it down out to the front line, and sending communications out to personal email addresses, all of which have their challenges, and Blink is designed specifically to help organizations to solve those challenges, but actually much more than that in terms of we're truly about trying to empower the front line, to maximize them, to provide them with the tools that they need to carry out their day-to-day jobs.
I have even been to factories where, for instance, they have digital signage, but it's not updated. Or they have access to a shared PC and you have to clean the dust of it. Is that the real situation in many companies still?
I absolutely, yes. And I think those ones that do have digital signage and those shared PCs that have dust sitting on them are probably leading the charge at the moment, because it is most common for us to walk into some of our customers where they're truly relying on paper-based notice boards to communicate out. And all of a sudden, and especially given the backdrop of the past 18 months, communication has become so critical. And I think that's really highlighted some challenges in organizations. But you're spot on, Morten. That absolutely is the reality when we go and go into some of our customer sites.
I have also read that there are 2.7 billion of frontline workers. So it's many more than the desk workers. But is the time come for them now to be digital employees?
Yeah, it's a great point. So you're absolutely right. Frontline workers absolutely dwarf the number of desk-based workers globally. And if you then look at the technology stack, everything that we use is geared up to the smallest proportion of the workforce, those true desk-based workers. And if you look at the tools that you and I use, email, laptops, intranets, etc., the Microsoft 365 suite, great product set, but very much geared up towards the desk-based worker, and doesn't truly account for the largest proportion of the global workforce, that those frontline workers who are, again, disconnected both through IT and what they do. And in terms of, do I think if the market is ready? Absolutely. I think given the backdrop, again, of COVID over the past 18 months, it has highlighted just how critical communication is for businesses and for businesses to operate. And I think there's a real realization to gain a competitive edge in what is an extremely competitive marketplace. You have to engage your staff in a new way. You have to be able to retain the staff that you have, and you have to be able to attract better talent. And I think absolutely we're seeing businesses and organizations globally in a true race to digitalize their frontline.
If you look at the space, the vendor space, what would you say is the core positioning then of Blink compared to other vendors?
Yeah, again, a great question. I think our uniqueness is our approach to this. And if I go back to my original position of Blink at our core, because as you said, there's many names, but at our core, a communications platform, we also wholeheartedly believe to be a successful comms app, you have to be more than communication. You have to give those frontline workers a real benefit and a real reason to engage with a platform like Blink. And it pains me to say this, but often communication is not enough. And we've seen this time and time again, where someone has tried to launch a communication only platform and it just does not get adopted by the front line, because in reality, that isn't a big enough hook to bring them into the platform. So our approach and what sets us apart is that we have a true utility first led model. And what that really means is we provide workers with a benefit to downloading a platform like Blink. We see ourselves as a digital front door, providing access into all the different systems that the business has invested in. And that could be Workday from an HCM platform, that could be ADP from a payroll perspective, that could be rostering and a scheduling system. All these tools that workers need to access, but often find challenging because they can't quite remember their usernames and passwords because they're not accessing them on a daily basis. They can't URL them and bookmark them because they don't have a laptop and a browser to do that for. So all of that leads to friction. And what Blink becomes is that single app that provides them access to these different systems, a real benefit. And the communications piece is almost secondary. It's once you have people engaging with a platform like Blink, the adoption goes sky high. And on average, we see about an 80% monthly active user rate across all of our customer base. And once they're in the platform, being social human beings like we all are, we start to engage with the content that the organization is sharing and their peers are sharing as well.
So the core is, or the key point is also utility, sort of an integration with some type of operational tools that you need in the work. The communication part, is that top down, or can you also do two-way communication, feedbacks, and what are the trends here? Do people need two-way communication, or is top-down communication enough?
I think it's a fundamental need for human beings to have and require two-way communication. So absolutely not just top down. And in reality, what we see is that probably 60 to 70% of the communication that takes place in our platform is peer-to-peer and bottom up. And without going into too much detail, we are fairly decentralized and really encourage that peer-to-peer and two-way communications, and ultimately providing workers with a voice. So therefore, the comms that they're seeing is really beneficial to them because it is relevant. It is within their sphere that they work in. And the top-down communication is woven into that, so it doesn't overwhelm the workforce So yeah, in answer to your question, Morten, we see almost a 70-30 split between more bottoms-up peer-to-peer communication versus the actual top-down communication that an organization may push out.
What about the experience during the pandemic? All desk workers have gone home, working from home, and are now discussing whether they are going to be hybrid or remote or whatever. What about the frontline workers? Because they haven't been able to work from home. They have been the workers that stayed the course and made the society work, sort of. What were their experiences during the pandemic regarding digital communication?
Yeah, of course, and you're right that the front line. First off, Blink as an organization has been using the term frontline, and those in the industry have been using the term frontline for many years. But as the pandemic came in, the media really shone a light on what the frontline, who they are and what they do, and what a critical role they play in society. So I think one kind of positive takeaway that we've seen from the pandemic is just the attention and light that's now being shone on the frontline workers, because they truly are the backbone of society. What I've seen happen over the past 18 months or so is that first off, it's been an incredibly tough time, and this is very much my opinion outside looking in, but a very tough time. And what we're hearing from our customers is that actually during the pandemic, everyone really did bunker down and was very much in it together. But now what we're seeing coming out of it is that the workforce are incredibly tired and now seeing, and organizations are seeing fairly high attrition levels for the front line, and really trying to do everything they can to combat those attrition levels.
But does it have to be then a separate channel, a separate application for frontline workers and another one for the desk workers? Or how can you create a united culture? How can you create one company where the people are working from office or in the field?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I wholeheartedly, and we wholeheartedly believe that the challenges are very different if you're a desk-based worker and you're a frontline worker. And if you start to look at that through the eyes of a frontline worker, they haven't grown up like you and I have on corporate IT. So they don't make the same allowances that perhaps you and I do for how clunky corporate IT can be. Their expectations are set by the likes of consumer grade tech. So Deliveroo, Uber, Spotify, Facebook, etc., Twitter. That true next generation of UI and UX. Any platform that you're going to expect adoption from has to have that again, next generation tier 1 UI UX. Back to your question in terms of, so that's my first kind of view on this, is that the needs are very different, and the workers expect different things. Then back to the question of, well, is there a unified platform that can serve both? Absolutely. And while we focus on businesses that have a high number of frontline workers, and on average, I would say probably 70% of our customers' workforce on average are frontline. But of course, there's another 30% within the business that still need to be engaged and communicated over. And I think there are an abundance of very, very good tools out there that really caters for the true desk-based workers, some intranet providers, the Microsoft 365 suite, etc. And where Blink sits is very much providing a platform that sits over the both, that truly accounts for the frontline, but also has a desk-based application as well, where their desk-based colleagues can communicate and engage with the entire business, and not just the desk-based or vice versa for the frontline.
But why is it that frontline workers cannot use, for instance, Microsoft Teams with the SharePoint in the back end? Teams is growing very, very fast. And why can't you use that app also for the frontline workers?
Again, so this is very much my opinion, and I would love to do this again, Morten, in the future, and perhaps we bring a frontline representative on the call, and we can ask their opinion. But certainly, what we see out there is that the Microsoft suite is again a very powerful fit for purpose for the desk-based worker. When you put yourself in the shoes of a frontline worker, be that a bus driver, an EMT, or a frontline clinician, to do everything you can do with Blink, you of course can do with the 365 suite, but it would be across SharePoint, email, Microsoft Kaisalis, OneDrive, Yammer. Therefore, you're asking a frontline worker on their personal device, because the business often haven't provided them with a corporate device, to download 5 or 6 essentially communications applications on their device, whereas in reality, we just don't see that happening. And even if they do, what we often see is that the UI and UX isn't really built for mobile, that they're much more built for desk-based experiences. So therefore, the user experience on the mobile is fairly clunky, and it comes back to not being in line with consumer grade tech. And that's very much what we're trying to address, is a simple, intuitive app that the frontline can just pick up and use without any formal training, but actually is much more than communication and provides them with a real benefit to engaging with it.
What about getting adoption? Because as you say, the mobile, neither the phone nor the subscription is usually paid by the company. And why should then an employee use his free time or free mobile phone to corporate goals? Do you have problems in getting adoption because of that kind of topics, discussion with the people that you're going to onboard?
There's certainly an educational piece to be had with the frontline, and I think it comes back to trying to get across that what we're looking to do is provide them with a platform that makes their lives better for the frontline. So if you look at that through a transportation lens, and a lot of processes in the world of transit are still very paper-based, even down to scheduling and rostering, where providers will print out the upcoming schedule. So if you're a driver and you want to know what shifts that you're working the next week, you may not know that until Monday morning when you turn up to the depot. You find the single folder that sits there, you flick through and check the schedules, upcoming schedules that you're on, which, by the way, now given again that the COVID situation isn't the most hygienic or safe way to do that process, but that is often what resides. And if we can, through Blink, take that information and digitalize it and allow the worker in the morning before he leaves the house to open up the Blink application and start seeing his upcoming rostering for the next week, well, all of a sudden then we're giving that worker 5 minutes back in his day, and there is a real tangible benefit for him to want to open up the Blink platform, and because it's providing him again a benefit there.
What about the provisioning of users? Because as you also said, that first-line workers usually don't have an identity, maybe in Azure AD or Okta or whatever, and don't have an email. So how do you get them on board?
Yeah, great question. So, and it comes back to our vision as a platform isn't to replace back-end systems. We see ourselves sitting over the top. So if there are best-in-class systems already, we would look to integrate into them, and that can be for a payroll system or a rostering system. But as you just said, Morten, in terms of how do we manage users, well, if an organization has invested in Azure AD, then we would look to pull that information out of there. If they have that information on the entire workforce within an HCM platform such as Workday, again, we would look to pull that information from there. If they don't, and it's not that uncommon, then Blink becomes the single source of truth for who works in the organization, and therefore onboarding users takes a slightly different tack, where we use phone numbers, email addresses, or if none of the above information is available for the organization, we use a personalized QR code where the worker can scan it. It's a how-to sheet. It will take them directly into the App Store. It will log them in, and then it will ask for some basic user information. And then in that case, Blink will become that single source of truth of who is in the organization and who works with the business.
Where do you see the future for the employee apps? Will the focus still be communication, or will they grow and be sort of the hub or the for frontline workers as a portal is in for desktop workers?
Yeah, great question. So first off, I truly believe that over the next 5 years, there will be employee apps on every single one of the frontline workers' device. I think that is a wave that is going to happen, because the workforce, that proportion of the workforce, has been truly left behind by the notion of digital transformation. So this is a very big step forward in terms of their experience and their day-to-day lives. But I absolutely share that vision that you said at the end of the question there, is that I think these platforms, and certainly the way where Blink is geared up to deliver, is that we will become that hub where all of a sudden IT departments and the business can start launching new digital services through platforms like Blink, where previously that they just were not able to do.
Will that then include HR or support or some kind of collaboration, or is there a danger that will also be a new Swiss knife, which won't work because you include too much functionality? Is that a danger?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think you do have to be cognizant of that. And if you look at why, in my opinion, intranets don't really work, and certainly don't work for the front line, is that they become a cold repository of information that's difficult to navigate, and actually, therefore, finding information you want is very challenging. So I think it is on organizations like Blink and working in partnership with our customers to make sure that doesn't happen. But I do believe that being a system of access, and so a hub, so a system of access, rather than being that system of record, replacing these systems is the way to go. And it's all around providing fingertip access for the front line, where they just wouldn't have been able to access those systems, or would have found it very challenging previously.
Regarding adoption, I would think that there are still some challenges because mobile phones you may not use in a retail store when you're focusing on the client. Maybe you can't use it because you have to take care of some production system, or maybe you're driving. How can you then utilize the app when there are some kind of restrictions? And maybe sometimes you have a team leader which is more strict than necessary because they are afraid of interfering with the business.
Yeah, great point. But it comes back to the needs for the frontline are very different to the needs of the desk-based workforce. And I think if you look at it through the lens of the desk-based worker, you and I may sit here collaborating on Teams. I mean, we use Blink internally, but you and I may sit here collaborating on Teams, and we need that information to carry out our day jobs. The frontline don't have that same relationship with communications. They are, as you said, they're servicing the client. They're the true frontline. They're the face of the business, out talking to the customer base. Their communication needs are very different, and it's less synchronous, continuous communication that they require, but they do require important business updates. So they may not be checking their device or glued to their device day in, day out, because that isn't the requirement that they have, but they do need to access that important update information that the business is sharing, or important peer-to-peer updates. And that is where platforms like Blink come in and really provide those workers with a voice and with access to that content that previously was on a notice board or being lost to a personal email address.
So it's not only a better user experience for the employee, but it's also a return of investment for the company because it can increase productivity and collaboration.
You absolutely spot on. Yes. What we see is businesses where they engage their staff in a new way, in a much better way. The workforce have a higher discretionary effort, and in turn deliver a much better experience to the end customer, and that could be across the transportation setting, through to the healthcare setting, through to retail. And in parallel to that, we often find that workforces that engage their staff and truly want to engage their staff, and that's not just top down pushing out information, that is adopting a culture of listen and reacting. And whereas Blink is the underlying technology, but we're not the silver bullet here. You have to combine that with a real desire from a business to want to engage the front line and back to that listen and react. We see awesome results around driving down frontline turnover. And in one of our largest transportation clients, we've seen a 26% reduction in frontline turnover after implementing Blink. But again, it wasn't our technology that was the silver bullet. It was very much combined with the desire for that business to change their culture and engage their staff in a new way and really listen and react to the feedback they were receiving.
The pandemic has also made some major discussions and promotion of values like inclusiveness and things like that. Is this inclusiveness of the frontline workers in the digital workplace a part of that wave, you could say?
I think so. I think everyone is much more mindful now than ever on not just absolutely inclusivity, but also wellness and well-being for their peers and for the workforce. So I think there is a true desire from businesses and business leaders to include everyone, not just the desk-based workforce, because they were almost the low-hanging fruit because there were tools and systems out there already, but the entire organization. And in light of the pandemic, Morten, what we're seeing is that communication is definitely moving up the stack, and it is no longer maybe 3, 4, 5th on a CEO's must to do items. It is now number 1 or 2. So communication is now more important than it's ever been. Yeah, exciting and really, really great to listen to your explanation of the trends and what you see. If we, in the last question from me, look ahead, what do you think the future will bring, maybe both for desktop workers and for frontline workers? Yeah, absolutely. So certainly from a frontline perspective and organizations that have a high number of frontline, I think we will see more and more organizations investing in technology like Blink. I think the need is there like it's never been there before. The business case really does stack up. And what I then think that means for the industry is that organizations can be much more ambitious in their digital transformation strategy, because then they will have the technology infrastructure in place that touches all of the workforce, not just the desk-based workforce, and can start rolling out new digital services to the front line. And I think we will see a real competitiveness in the industries that have high number of frontline workers powered by technology, and technology applications like Blink. For the desk-based workforce, I think we will see similar. I think it will be very interesting to monitor, and I'm not particularly close to this, but to monitor the trends of how organizations bring staff back to work. How do they settle on a happy medium of, are we going to go swing right back to the office full time, or are we going to swing the other way like we've seen some large organizations do and have a true remote staff, which then presents some of the same challenges that we're of course addressing with the front line. But maybe then the issue in some years will not be, are you working from home or working hybrid or frontline working, but you have some common ground that you can build culture and information on. Is that the vision? Absolutely. Yes, I think so.
Well then, Matt, thank you very much. As I understand, you are, when the pandemic levels off, you will be heading to the United States to build Blink in the Americas. So good luck with that, and good luck to you in Blink.
Thank you, Morten. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.